So here are your boxes. These are actual legit art boxes. This is what I use at home. I have a couple of these, but you get to use one as a table. This is what you'll share, and this is where all your supplies will be kept. Notice that there is a label at the top referring to your corresponding table. Do not take somebody else's table. Keep all your supplies within your box. So let's take a look inside. So that is the main hatch there. You're going to open the lid, and there is a multi-tiered kind of shelf in here, but here's what's on the top shelf. All your pencils are on one side. There's a sanding tool. There's also little containers of blending stumps that you can see right there. We'll be using those today. Opening it up even further, accordion style, there are some other things. There are kneaded erasers, which are a real treat to use. There's a chamois, so a chamois is a type of cloth. And then there are some other things like the pencil sharpener, which we'll be going over later in this lesson. Make sure to keep your kit organized. I don't want to see pencil shavings in there. I don't want to see crumbled up or powdered charcoal in those bins. You want to keep those tidy. Today we will be primarily using these three pencils. So they are pencils, but they're actually with a charcoal lead going all the way through them. And if you look to the back, like I'm showing you right here, they have numbers on them. See how it says charcoal and then 2B medium, charcoal, 4B soft. The one on the top reads 6B extra soft. So you want to pay attention to those terms, 2B, 4B, 6B. Those numbers refer to how hard or how soft the charcoal is, how light, how dark the charcoal is. Okay, so this is way sped up, but that's so I can show you quickly. At the top of your paper, you're going to get a value scale. Now you see me using a long 18-inch ruler there. You can use a regular 12-inch. You don't have to do the 18. I also made a handy tracing tools that measures an exact square that you could use in its place, which is awesome. So you can do this 9-step value scale using that little square and tracing it. So I'll show you that in a minute. I didn't have that thought until later, but I went ahead and measured it out the old-fashioned way. Below the 9 squares, you're going to put in a series of 4 rectangles. Now, those rectangles measure 4 inches on the short side, 6 inches on the long side. So a standard photograph size. And you're putting an aisle kind of in between the 2 sets of 4x6s. And then you're also adding a couple extra squares, actually 4 to be specific. You can see me using that stencil tool right there. Just make sure you return it to its little plastic baggie at the end of the period. Okay, so I went over all my lines with Sharpie, so to make it a little bit more obvious. And I'm going to show you, here's our value scale up at the top, which is what we're focusing on. And we're going to work on the first one and the last one first. That's our priority. Fortunately, the first one we don't have to do anything to because it's already white, and that is our lightest value, is number 1. So we're going to go instead to number 9, which is our darkest dark. Now the easiest way to do our darkest value is to use the 6B, extra soft, extra velvety. That's the one you want to use here. Okay, so we're going to fill in that box 9 using the 6B charcoal pencil. And when I do this, I'm using kind of a hybrid, not the point and not quite all of the flat, laying flat on the flat side, but I am using the flatter side of the pencil when I'm shading. And I'm going to show you in a minute how to hold your pencil so you can see what I'm doing. But this is why I love charcoal, is because you can get the really solid dark blacks, and you can't get that really with graphite, at least not without it being like highly reflective. So we can get our really dark blacks with charcoal. So here's how I'm holding my pencil. I'm holding it further back and I'm pinching it loosely, not too tight. And I'm doing this sort of motion where I'm going back and forth, kind of moving my wrist. And then I rotate the pencil point every 30 seconds to a minute. And the reason why I rotate is so I don't wear down my pencil point on one side, because that's going to be awkward to use. So I like to wear it down evenly. So shade, shade, rotate. All right, so now where to go? We have number 1, we have number 9. You got it, mid-tone. So we're going to the middle values, which is, in this case, number 5. It's right-ish in the middle, so we're going to go to that first. And you want to get a nice middle gray. So I'm using a 2B. So I've switched my pencil up, and I've checked the side of the pencil, and I'm using a 2B here to lightly shade in that 5. Now I don't want to go too dark and I don't want to go too light. You want to kind of visualize, if you were to add your lightest value to your darkest value, what would be like a 50-50 ratio, and that's what you get for number 5 here. When I'm doing this kind of shading, I'm going one direction, so I'll pick a direction to go in this case I'm going diagonal, but then I'll oftentimes go over it another direction after I've got the first layer on. I'll put a vertical pass or a horizontal pass. You don't want it to look patchy though. If you have areas where it's patchy, you're going to have to lift off with your erasing tool, your eraser. Okay, so here's what it looks like now with your 1 done, your 5 done, and your 9 done. So you have the lightest value, the middle value, and the darkest value taken care of. So now I'm going to go to number 8. You could go to number 2 or you could go to number 4, but in my mind, I'm going to the next darkest value. I'm going to continue to use the same type of pencil that I used on the 9. So I'm using a 6B here, and I'm just being careful that I don't press too hard. With charcoal, it is all about how much pressure you exude on the end of your pencil point. And I am going to go around the room checking to make sure you're holding your pencil correctly, because it is going to feel weird at first. You can see me layering and building this up to make sure I have it right. Now, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate yet. So I took some time off camera to work on these. So I have my 6 and 7 now in place, and I still want to be comparing them. This is not perfect yet. I want to point out that if you do get it too dark, here's what I want you to do. You're going to open up your kneaded eraser if it's not already open, and you're going to squish it into the shape you need. So if you are doing a little area, you kind of squish it into the shape or area you need. If you're doing something very detailed, I'd put a point on it like that, but you probably won't need that today. So you might need more of like a lump, and then you kind of stamp down on your paper and lift up. So again, I've worked off camera to get my lighter values. So I have a range in values. Remember that each square has to show a progression from the square to the left. So it should be a different value, but just by a degree. Similar, but different. That's what you want to go for. And I do want you to be very meticulous on this. I want you to take 30 minutes getting it perfect. I don't want any big gaps in your squares. I want you to use tight shading, so no loose hatch marks for this. And you might need to go over it repeatedly. And then at the end, you're doing what I'm doing right there, which is just to clean it up with an eraser. Before we get started on the ombre, I want to show you how to sharpen these pencils. They're special pencils. You can't just put them in an electric sharpener. You have to use one of these little handheld sharpeners. I have extras, so if it's dull or not working, let me know. So you're going to stick it in, twist it around, and you should have a whole bunch of pencil shavings coming out. That's okay. You just want to make sure you dump them in the trash and not into your bin. So if it gets jammed, you use this handy tool and unjam it using that. Okay, going back to the ombre. So you are going to be using kind of that strip that's 1 inch by about 3 inches, and we're going to get an ombre. So if you don't know what that means, it's the same thing as a gradient. It just means that you go dark on one side and get it to fade smoothly to the other side. So here I'm starting off with a 6B. So make sure you check the side of your pencil, make sure you're using the extra soft 6B. And this is all about pressure. So you're putting quite a bit of pressure at first, and then you're going to start to ease off. So I am going to be switching up my pencils as I'm going through this ombre. And just try and figure out what type of person you are. Are you a heavy pressure person? Are you too light to pressure? Or maybe you're in between. It's helpful to know because it will help you out later when we're doing more detailed drawings. So I've begun to shift here. And you can see it's darker on one side, lighter on the other. I'm using the 4B now. So I've switched pencils off camera. And then I'm going to go to the 2B towards the end. Now the very end I'm actually going to leave white. So I don't want to cover that up entirely. I want to leave like a ½ inch or an inch right now of white. So you can see the fade starting to happen. You need an ombre in order to make a form look like it's round. You need it in the background. You need it in painting too. So this is a valuable skill and you have to ace it. Okay, so here's the ombre, right? You can see at least 3 values, probably more. You're going to go in with a blending stump next. Again, here's what the blending stump looks like. When you use it, you're not using the tip, you're using the side. And you kind of roll it around just like I showed you with the pencil, and you're putting the contact on the side. You only use the tip for very detailed work, like if you were working on the eye. So anyway, you get to use that blending stump, and I always start on the lighter side because I know that my stump is clean, at least right now. So I'm starting on the light side, and I'm going to blend. And to blend, I like to go back and forth in kind of ovals or tight circles, but then I'll do different directions too. What you want to avoid is streakiness or areas where the charcoal's built up on some spots but not on others. You don't want it to be patchy. You want it to be smooth. Think like a smooth fade or shift. That's what you want here. And it takes some finessing. So slow down. Don't try and rush it. I want it to be as good as you possibly can make it. There are times when you might have to fill back in with some more charcoal if there are gaps or areas where you can't get it to fill. There are also times when it's appropriate to use your kneaded eraser to stamp and lift off. Like if there's a patchy spot that looks funny, erase it out and reapply the blending stump. And this takes a while. Don't just try and do it all in like 30 seconds. Slow down. Here's what my ombre looks like after it's been completely blended. You should see a smooth gradation from light to middle tone ranges or middle values to your darker values. For those 4 small squares that are left kind of on their own, that's where you're going to do some practice similar to what we did before with pencil. You're going to do the scribble technique. You're going to be doing the dotting technique, cross hatching, and hatching. And the reason why this is important is because all those techniques can be worked into charcoal, and I've seen it done, and it can be an amazing effect to use. So it's another tool to add to your box.